Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today and to see how many people care about safe routes to school and making our roads and pathways safer for children here in Hawaii. And it's really all of you that are going to make the difference.
Interrupt real quick.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in New York City and New Jersey and learned to ride my bike on the streets of Manhattan. I didn't really think that that was unusual until I started to go other places in the United States, and so I was lucky that I had a dad that took me around, and he had a real ethic that he wanted to have his kids learn how to bike, learn how to walk, learn how to navigate a city, learn how to take a subway, learn how to get around. This was somewhat to the horror of my mom, who lived in New Jersey, and when she found out what he was doing with us on the weekends. But it really instilled within me a sense of confidence and courage and my ability to be able to get around as a kid. And when I was 12, my mom was a single mom and a working mom, and I would go to camp in the summer. But after I had this experience, learning how to ride my bike around Manhattan, I thought I can navigate around New Jersey just fine. And I had a lot of plans. I wanted to take extra math classes at summer school and do art and go to the pool. So when I was 12 years old, I said that I was going to get around on my own during the summers on my bicycle, and I would be just fine. And somehow I convinced my mom to let me be able to do that, and I became what is now called a free-range kid. And most kids don't have the opportunity to be able to do that today, but that's part of what Safe Routes to School is trying to do, make it safe for our kids to be able to walk and bike everywhere. And then that helps to free our parents up, and it creates kids that are really self-reliant and are able to move around their communities. So I moved to California about 20 years ago, and I've been living just north of San Francisco in Marin County, and I got into a car accident 16 years ago. And I was working for an environmental organization, and I was driving every day about 30 miles each way from Marin to the environmental organization in San Francisco. And my friend from the San Francisco Bike Coalition, who I was doing a little bit of volunteer work, looked at me one day and he said, "Deb, you are not environmentalist. You are driving your car everywhere." And I thought, wow, that's didn't really sit well with me. But I realized that he was right, that I wasn't really walking my talk. And I've always been someone who wanted to walk my talk. But I wasn't ready to make a change. It didn't really seem like it was realistic to me. I mean, my home was here. I liked my home. I liked my job in the city. I liked the lifestyle of being in the city. And it wasn't until I got into a car accident that I decided, okay, I'm going to try living life without a car. And it was so challenging that I got involved with making things safer for walking and biking. And I started out at my local school in a rural area out in the San Geronimo Valley. They had a Healthy Start grant, which was one of the first grants that came from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in order to help make schools and communities safer. And when they surveyed the parents, they found out that the #1 need was transportation. Now, you needed to have transportation in order to be able to get to health care, in order to be able to buy your groceries, in order to be able to bring your kid to their friend's house or an after-school practice or whatever it was. Transportation was something that was needed. And there was no public transportation, and there was only shoulders that were not really safe for walking and biking. And so about 15 years ago, I embarked on working to help our local school. And then I got involved with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. And along the path, in the late 90s, during the economic boom, Congressman Oberstar, who was a very high-ranking member from the Transportation Committee in Congress, was looking for ways to increase bicycling in America. And this was actually because his wife had passed away due to breast cancer, and it was very, very sad, but one of the things that prolonged her life was actually bicycling. And then he took up bicycling after her death, and that helped him to get out of his sadness that he had related to his loss. And he felt like it was important to bring bicycling and walking more to the United States because it simply wasn't safe. And he heard a presentation from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on how childhood obesity had skyrocketed in the last 30 years. And now 1 in 3 kids is overweight or obese. And 70% of those children will come on to become obese adults. And this has staggering costs related to the medical establishment of about $168 billion a year. And so he decided to start small and embark on pilot programs, 2 pilot programs, one in the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And so I said, well, pick me. We've been doing a lot of this, and I'll do a good job for you, and we'll make the program work. And so he did. I was very lucky. He deputized me as his person to run the Safe Routes to School pilot program in California. And so I did that with Wendy Callens, and this was 12 years ago. And what we did was we started off by picking 9 schools in Marin County, and we only had a $50,000 grant, which is not a tremendous amount of money. But what we did have was we had the goodwill of the people, just like you have the goodwill of all these people here in Hawaii. And so what we put to work was a program that really energized parents, principals, public works directors, law enforcement, elected officials, and we engaged the media. Engaging the media was a really important part of it too. We took baseline numbers on how many kids were walking and biking in the beginning of the intervention, and then we also took numbers at the end. And we created teams at every school that were led by parents, parent volunteers. And the parents know everything about their school and their community, the ones who are really involved, and so do the kids. So we asked questions, because every Safe Routes to School program really needs to be designed from the ground up. It's going to be different at every single school. It's going to be different here in Hawaii than it is in California, than it is in Arizona or Wisconsin or New York. It's going to be different on Kauai than it is on the Big Island, than it is in Oahu. It's going to be different at the Kaloa School than it is actually at the Kilauea School. It's going to be different everywhere, because Safe Routes to School is really designed based upon what the needs are. And so we formed these teams of parents at the schools, and then we asked questions, and we did parent surveys. And that's the first part of Safe Routes to School. There are the 5 E's for Safe Routes to School. The first E is evaluation. And you start by evaluating the circumstances. What are the barriers? Why aren't people walking and biking now? Is it because there's a really busy street? Is it because there's barking dogs in an area that are scaring kids? Is it because you simply need a crossing walk on the corner there? Do you need new sidewalks? Can you not cross the street because the timing of the traffic light is too fast and it won't let you get across the street before it turns red and then the cars start going? So you find out what the answers to those things are and the barriers, and then you design the intervention in order to improve it. Then you do student tallies in the school, and I know that this has been done all throughout much of Hawaii with the University of Hawaii, which is really wonderful because it means you have a lot of data right now already. And in the classroom, you ask the kids, how did you get to school today? And they raise their hands. And you always do that at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. So that's the evaluation piece. The other piece that we did was we did education. And I know that that's happening, and Laura's doing a tremendous amount of education here on the Big Island, where you actually teach kids the skills for how to walk and how to bike safely. You teach them what direction to ride their bike in and walk. You ride with traffic, but you walk against traffic. You teach them a variety of different skills about how to look before you cross the street, and the specifics of how to ride your bicycle as part of traffic. And you also educate the parents. Believe it or not, a lot of the biggest violators and speeders on the road are parents that are trying to get their kids to school, but they're late on their way to school. And so you need to educate the parents too, and make it so that the parents understand that they're really part of creating this culture, a culture where it's safe for kids to walk and bike. And then another one of the E's is related to law enforcement. It's very, very important to involve your law enforcement. You have them on every island, and we have them all throughout the United States. But a lot of times they're looking out for other things, and they may not be looking out for the needs of kids on the way to school. And so if you're able to work with elected officials and direct the law enforcement in order to be around schools on rotating days, on certain days of the week, then all of a sudden everybody's on their best behavior when there's a police car that's right there outside of the school, and people slow down. And then it's critically important to have engineering solutions as well. And it's been wonderful to be able to work with Lyle on the County of Kauai. He's doing a tremendous amount to assess the needs around different schools and to make changes. They're making changes now coming up at the Kaloa School. But you really need to have an engineer to help you do that. One of the things that we learned along the way was that parents can point out problems. Cars are going too fast. I can't cross the street here, the sidewalk is broken. But it's much better if parents don't prescribe the solutions and that we actually work together with the engineers to prescribe the solutions, because they're the experts and they've been trained in a variety of different techniques. It was amazing. This morning Lyle showed me something that I've never seen before. A lot of times parents ask for barriers on the side of the road between where the cars travel and where a shoulder is, or if there's not a shoulder. But you can't do that because of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices devices, and engineers know that you have to stay within that in order to be able to install different types of infrastructure. But what he found was that there's this company that manufactures this thermoplastic, which is like paint, but it stays down better on the roads, and it looks like a 3D image. And so as you're a car and you're driving down the road, you actually think that there's a barrier there, and so you're much more careful. And he told me a story about how this was installed in a location on a really busy road with a blind curve, and the cars used to go 60 to 70 miles per hour where there were people on the side of the road. And after they installed this thermoplastic marking, they slowed down to 30 to 35 miles per hour. So there's really creative solutions, and I was totally amazed. I never heard about this until Lyle came in. So you got to make the engineers your friend and bring them out there. It's really good to do a walkabout, and this is what we did in Marin County, where you walk with parents around the school, and there are forms where you can mark out where are the problems, and then you work together with the engineering department to develop solutions. And then last but not least is encouragement. There's walk and bike to school days. How many of you have been able to go out on a walk or a bike to school day? Raise your hand. Many of you, good. So if you have, I know that you've experienced the joy that is a part of the kids when they're out there walking or bicycling to school. It's really a sight to behold. It's almost like a parade that happens on the way to school. And when I talk to kids, and I encourage you too, the next time you go out and you go on one of these walks, talk to the kids. And when I talk to them and I ask them, why are you doing this? They say things like, it makes me feel healthier, that I wake up in the morning and I'm tired, but after I walk to school, I feel more energized and I'm more ready to learn. Kids talk about how they like being able to spend time with their friends on their way to school. And if you talk to parents, they talk about how it's quality time with them and their kids to be able to be out there exercising and really becoming a part of their community. And so it's really been exciting to see that progress. And as a result of the pilot program we did in Marin, we increased the number of kids walking and biking by 57% in only 1 year. And so that was pretty amazing to have happen, and we weren't able to make the infrastructure changes in that time period. That was all through the other E's. And the news spread like wildfire all throughout the United States. All of a sudden, people wanted to have programs like this, and everyone started calling me and saying, how do we run a Safe Routes to School program like this in our community? And so I realized that we needed to really work together with Congress to make sure that we could bring this program to all of the United States, and that we needed a national organization in order to help make sure that this would be able to spread in the way that we wanted it to. So I worked on both of those things from around 2001 to 2005. And in 2005, the Congress passed the Federal Transportation Bill, SAFE-TLU, and it included $612 million for Safe Routes to School in the bill. There have since been transportation extensions since September of 2009, and now there's about $1 billion that's been authorized by Congress. About 71% of that has already been awarded to projects all throughout the United States. And every state gets a minimum of $1 million a year. So Hawaii has about $7 million of funding. And later on this morning, you're going to hear more about how that's being spent and an upcoming call for applications so that all the islands can apply for additional funding. So it's been really exciting to see this progress all throughout the United States. Safe Routes to School is now at more than 12,300 schools throughout the United States with the federal money alone. And then when you combine other programs that may not have official funding but are doing it on their own, my guesstimate would be that that number will be doubled. And it's really important that we find other ways to fund Safe Routes to School and to make the program safer for kids to walk and bike, because even when all that money is expended, it's only going to serve 10% of the schools in America. And if we're going to create a transportation transformation that's going to make America healthier, then we really need to increase that number and make it so that every school in the United States is served in some way through Safe Routes to School. And so there's a variety of different ways that we look at that, and I'm really excited about your afternoon policy session because you're going to be able to hear a little bit more about the ways that that's happening here on the islands. But take, for example, school initiatives. So schools all set their own policies. And so we want to make sure that schools have policies where they encourage walking and biking. In some schools, where they may have students from a large catchment area, like I know that they do on the islands, where students may have to travel 10 miles to get to school. Some schools are working to develop a remote drop-off point that's about a half a mile away from the school. And then kids can walk and bike the remaining distance, often with parent escorts in order to get there. At a school in Columbia, Missouri, they did this, and they started actually dropping the buses off at the edge of a park about a half a mile away from the school, and the kids started walking up to the school. And the principal at the school actually attributes an improvement in academic performance to the fact that kids are now exercising every morning before they get to the school, because more and more studies are now showing that physical activity is linked to greater academic achievement and higher test scores. Another really great technique is the walking school bus. How many of you have joined a walking school bus? It's where a parent walks with a group of kids. Okay, a couple of people, Anne and Randy. So this is something that is very intriguing, because many parents feel way more comfortable when they have another parent who is able to help their children be able to get to school. And so a walking school bus works very much like a regular school bus, where the parents will walk and they'll pick up groups of kids along the way, and there are chaperones, and different neighbors take turn on various days of the week in order to be able to get the kids to school. A great example of this is in Ohio, and they actually got a federal grant for $45,000 to organize walking school buses over a 3-year time period. They now have 200 parent volunteers that are registered to help lead walking school buses, and there's been a huge increase in kids walking to school. Between 800 and 1,000 kids are walking to school now at these 5 schools, and you'll find about 100 bicycles at the bike racks. So it's amazing what you can do with the resources of parent volunteer power. That's only $45,000 over 3 years, but 200 volunteers. That's the kind of thing that you see happening with Safe Routes to School. One of the things that's really exciting to me about the upcoming call for applications here on the islands would hopefully be an opportunity to be able to allow for multiple, for a Department of Public Works to be able to make improvements at a multitude of locations. So I've been doing most of my work here in Kauai, because they're one of the communities putting prevention to work programs, and they're running programs at 5 schools. And Lyle in the engineering department has assessed the needs of those 5 schools. And what we're talking about doing is helping to prepare an application so that they could hopefully get funding from HDOT to make improvements at a variety of schools around the island with one application, and also to get funding to keep a Safe Routes to School coordinator who runs the education and encouragement part. And there's great examples of this all throughout the United States. In fact, there's one in Eugene, Oregon, where they received a $500,000 infrastructure grant in order to make sidewalk and crossing improvements around 5 different schools. So one application, improvements help with 5 schools, and then they received a $100,000 non-infrastructure grant to hire a Safe Routes to School program manager who then manages the education and encouragement at all of those different schools. And so that is very exciting because it means that all of a sudden you get the infrastructure and you also get the encouragement. And when you put all those 5 E's together and work with law enforcement and measure the difference and do the encouragement as well, all of a sudden you're setting the stage for a real transformation in how kids get to school and the opportunity to improve their health and also to improve their entire lives, because the things we teach kids when they're young are habits that they have when they grow older. And so Safe Routes to School truly is changing the habits of an entire generation. So sometimes people say to me, well, budgets are tight, and state budgets have been cut 10, 20%, sometimes even more. Education budgets are being cut. Companies have had to reduce bus costs for schools because there have been rising costs of fuel prices, and other costs have been on the rise, and school buses are being cut. And so what I have to say to that is Safe Routes to School is the most economic solution that you can make because of the cost of medical care. We talked about how health costs related to obesity are $168 billion a year. In the United States, 250 children, unfortunately, are still killed every year walking or biking. The cost related to that, and it's impossible to put a cost on a human life, but if you actually take a look at that over time, that's a loss of about $1.1 million per person that is lost. Very, 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 very sad, especially for the families, and so you can't even put a price on that. And then if you take a look at the cost of school busing within a short 1 mile distance of a school, you'll find that in many locations throughout the United States, they have to do hazard busing, which is because it's so congested around the schools that they actually have to bus the kids because it's unsafe for them to cross streets. Well, as an example, in Idaho, they were having to bus 70% of the kids that lived within 1 mile of school because they had to cross all these freeways. And instead, what they did eventually was, because they were able to apply for a federal Safe Routes to School grant, they were able to install an improvement. The improvement cost about $130,000. It was fully paid. Does that say?
That's number one.
Okay, thank you. It was fully paid for by the federal government, and now they're going to save $49,000 a year because they don't have to run a school bus. And so the one-time investment from the federal money is saving ongoing operations support for the school district. $49,000 a year can get you a teacher. We're talking cost-effective here. So it's very exciting. Other things that really relate to Safe Routes to School are policies like Complete Streets, which I know you'll hear a lot more about, which is that every road is designed to serve bicyclists and pedestrians, and that helps to make it that we're making wise investments for communities. School siting, making sure that if we're locating new schools, we're locating them where people live. And then state policies to make sure that communities have the opportunity to apply for infrastructure grants that serve a multitude of communities, for non-infrastructure funds that will allow for a program coordinator to coordinate needs on the entire island. I mean, I would love to see there be coordinators for Safe Routes to School on all of the different islands here throughout Hawaii. And it's been a real pleasure for me to have the opportunity to work with Hawaii on Safe Routes to School. I have been here about 10 times. I've spent most of my time on Kauai, but I've been here to Oahu several times and to Maui, and I was just at the Big Island. The first time I went to Kauai, I got rented a bike. Actually, I borrowed a bike from a friend, and my boyfriend at the time and I biked all the way from Kapa'a all the way up to the Nepali coast. And we camped along the way, and I learned about the need for improvements. And now that I'm coming back there again, it's been wonderful to be able to use the pathway that's along the shoreline of Kapa'a. So I believe that where there's a will, there's a way. And what I've seen from being here in Hawaii with the Hawaiian people is that there is a will here, and that you have an incredible spirit of aloha, an incredible spirit of helping each other. And so I really look forward to helping all of you to be able to make it safe for your kids to walk and bicycle to school through Safe Routes to School. And when we make it safe for our kids, we make it safe for everyone. So thank you very much.